Hello everyone, in this tutorial you will learn how to use SQL in Go. So to get started you can open up a new terminal and then we are going to initialize a new project. To do that we will write go mod init and we can call it SQL in Go. After that we're going to install the database driver we're going to work with. For this tutorial we're going to use SQLite, but you can use any other SQL databases and just install the correct driver. So to install SQLite we'll write this command, go get, and then the name of the package. So the next step is to connect to the database, and to do that we can start by creating a new file. We will call it main.go and then we set the package to be main. We create the main function, so func main. Then we can create two new variables. The first one we will call db and the second one we will call error, and we can set that to be SQL open, and the first argument will be the driver that we are going to use. So in this case SQLite 3. And the second argument is either a path to a database file or a database connection. It depends on the driver. For SQLite, it will be the database file path. We can write ./shop.db. And then we want to check if there was any error connecting to the database. So we can write if error not equal to nil. We will use log.fatal and pass the error. So this will log the error, and after that it will exit the program. And to make sure the database connection is closed when we are done, we want to write defer db.close. And then we also have to import the SQLite driver. For this tutorial we will use an order example. So here is a list of all the queries we will use. We will have a query to create a table, insert data, read data, and read data with a condition. We will also update an order and delete. So the next step, we will create a new folder and we will call it database, and inside that database folder we will have a file called orders.go, and here we can set the package to be database. We will import the SQL package. So we write import database SQL, and then we will create a new struct type order repository struct, and this will take a DB connection. By doing this, all the methods for the order repository will have access to the DB connection, and we don't have to pass it as an argument. The next step is to create an order struct. We can say type order struct. It will have an ID, and that will be an int. Product, that will be a string. Amount, and that will be an int. Next we want to add some methods. We can start with the create table method. We will then write func, and it belongs to the order repository. We can call it create table, and it will take no arguments, and it can return an error. Here we will create two new variables. First is underscore and the second one is error, and we set that to be r, and then we access the DB connection, and here we will use the exec method. So the exec method is used for queries that don't return any data. We can now start by writing our SQL create table if not exist, and it will be for the orders table, and then we specify the columns we want to create. We will say ID, and that will be a integer, primary key, auto increment. So here we set up a unique identifier, and every time a row is created, the ID will automatically be incremented. Then we can say product, and that will be of type text. And then the last column will be amount. That will be of type integer. After that, we want to return the error. Return error. We can now try it out. So go to the main file. Let's update the naming of this one. We can call it DB connection instead. So DB connection. We will then create a new order repository. So order repository. So we set that to be database.order repository. And here we will pass our DB connection, DB, and we pass DB connection. And we can now use the create table method. So error, and we set that to be order repository create table. If error not equal to nil, we will log it and exit the program. So log fatal error creating orders table error. Let's try to run this by opening a terminal. Go run main.go. And if we now open the file tree, we can see that the shop.db has been created. If you have any program installed on your computer to view SQLite database, you can use that. I have Table Plus installed on my computer. I will create a new connection. I'll click the plus here, and then I will select SQLite. And then I will select the shop.db file. You have it here, shop.db. Press open and connect. And we can see here that the orders table has been created. It has an ID, product, and the amount. Next, we want to add some more methods. So we want to have a method that let us insert an order. So func. And same as before, it belongs to the order repository. And we will call it insert. And as an argument, it will take an order, and it can return an error. And same as before, we will use our connection, and then we will use the exec method. Here we can say insert into orders, product, amount, and then we say values, and then we write 2 question marks, and these are placeholders that will be placed with the value that we pass to this method. And then as the other arguments to the exec method, we will say order dot product, order dot amount. So this will insert a new order row to the database with the product and the amount, and for the ID it will get auto generated. And also one important thing to notice, always use placeholders like this. Don't try to concatenate strings. That can make you vulnerable to SQL injection. And the last step in this method is just to return the error. The next method we want to write is for reading all the orders. We will call it get all, and it take no arguments, and it can return a slice of orders or an error. So we start by creating 2 new variables, rows and error. And this time we will use a function called query. So r.db.query. And the query method is used for queries that return data. Then we want to say select star from orders. And the star is a wildcard. It means we want to select all the columns that the order table has. We then want to check if there is an error. If error not equal to nil, in that case, there are no orders to return, so we will return nil, and then we will return the error. And for the rows, we will say defer rows.close, and this is to make sure we avoid memory leaks when we are done with the rows. What we want to do next is we want to create a slice of orders, and then we want to iterate over all the rows and transform them into an order. And we can start by creating an order slice, so var orders. Then we want to iterate over the rows, so for rows.next. Create the order variable, so var order And then we're gonna use the scan method on the rows. So we can say error and set that to be rows.scan. And here we want to pass the pointer to our orders field. We can say order.id, order.product, and then order.amount. And this will copy over the values to the order struct. Next, we want to check if there was an error. If error not equal to nil. In that case, we don't have any orders to return, so return nil and the error. Otherwise, we want to append to our order struct. So we can say orders, set that to be equal append, orders, and then order. And that's the last step. We want to return the order slice. So return orders and no error. The next method we're going to implement is to get an order by ID. Func order repository. And we will call it get by ID. As an argument, we will pass an int. So ID int. And it will either return an order or an error. So var order error. And this time, instead of using the query method, we will use the queryrow method. And the difference is the query method returns multiple rows and the queryrow method returns a single row. r.db queryrow, and inside here we want to say select star from orders where ID equal, and then our placeholder. Here we will pass the ID, and then same as before, we will use the scan method. So scan, we pass order ID, product, and amount. Next, we want to check if there is an error. If error not equal to nil, in that case, return. We can return an empty order and then the error. Else, we just return order and nil as error. So we now have a way to read multiple orders and single orders. Before we test this out, I will add two more methods, one for updating and one for deleting. So let's start by adding the one for updating an order. We call it update, and it will take order as an argument, order, and it can return an error. You will say underscore error and then set that to be r.db.exec. And here we can say update orders set product equal to be placeholder. We do the same for amount. And then we will add our where clause, where ID equals placeholder. And we will pass order product, order amount, and order ID. And here we can just return the error, return error. And then the last method will be the delete method. Delete, ID as an argument, ID int, and it can return an error, error underscore, then error. And we set that to be r.db exec delete from orders where ID equal placeholder, and then we pass our ID. And then we can return the error. If we now go to our main.go file, we can try these methods out. Let's start by inserting some orders. We can say order repository and then insert. So we have to pass our order struct here. We can say database.order, and we can say product, laptop, amount, let's say 10. And then we want to check if there was an error. So if error not equal to nil, in that case, we will do log.fatal error inserting order. Then we can pass the error. Let's insert one more order. So we can copy this. And then we can change, instead of laptop, we can say keyboard, maybe amount 50. So we should now have two orders in the database. Let's read them. Orders, error. And we can set that to be order repository get all, and if error not equal to nil, log.fatal error getting orders. Else we can print the orders out, so log.println, and then we pass orders. So let's try to run this and see what we get. Open up a terminal, go run main.go, and we can then see we get first order is laptop that has a ID of 1, and this has amount of 10, and then keyboard ID 2 with the amount 50. Let's also try the other methods. So we can say order, error, and we can use the get by ID. Here we can pass, for example, orders, and we take the first index and then say ID. We check if there's an error. And we do the same as before. We log error getting order. And we can now update the property on this order. So we say order, maybe amount, and we will set that to be 1500. And then we can do an update. Update, and we pass that order. Order. And then we can just check for error here. Error updating order. And let's copy this code. So we will get all orders again. After that, let's delete an order. Delete, and we can pass order.id. And we check for error here. Error deleting order. And then to see that the order was deleted, we can just get all orders again. So let's try to run this. But before we run this, we can delete the database. So we will create it from scratch again. And then we open up a terminal. So we can first see that we get the laptops and the keyboard. And then we update the amount of the laptop order. We set that to 1500. And then we can see that we have deleted the laptop orders. So you have now used all the common database operations that you would need. The last thing I want to talk about is something called context and timeout. Here we can just write, for example, func order repository, and we can just call it test. And you might see code that look like this, ctx cancel, and we set that to be context with timeout, and then we will get context background 5 second defer cancel, and then the query might look like this. So say rdb query context, and we pass the context, and then we do a query as usual. So we select dot star from orders. What this does is, this is the same as using the query method that we did, let's see, here. The difference is we create context, and this context will say that, so if it takes longer than 5 seconds, it will cancel the query. And this is to avoid blocking the database connection. And you have one for all the other methods too. So you have one called exec context, one called query context. This is the one here. And you also have one queryrow context. They work the same as the other methods. It's just that you pass time context and tell the query that you want to cancel it if it take more than X seconds or whatever. And when you're writing queries in production, that's probably the way you want to go. So you set a timer and don't let some query block the connection. So this is the end of the tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed it. You have now learned how to use SQL in your Go apps. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial.